Номер один. Монтажер. Бардачок. Что это вообще? Опять холодно, что ли? Понимаешь, что здесь? Народ идет, народ, надо это и посмотрим. Ну вот это имеется в виду. Ну вот это есть, ну вот это есть. Ну нет, ну вот это есть, да. Ну вот это и было. Вот это было самое. Наоборот, то есть наоборот трошки. Да, наоборот. Вот это и есть на самом деле. Эх. Да, нормально. это действительно обороты, все безопасные путешествия. Шлифует это.
I'm going to share with you what I intended to say if I had been elected in 2016. My fellow Americans, today you sent a message to the whole world. Everybody will be knocked down. The question is, will you get back up? I want to share my life lessons with the hope that it might help you as you navigate your own life. I made so many gaffes and mistakes. There are steps you can take to build confidence in yourself, to begin to trust yourself about the decisions you will make. This class is for anyone at any age who wants to think about building a life of meaning and purpose, of having a mission that captures what you're willing to stand up for. Everyone, every one of you has the ability to be resilient. I've been, reduced to tears. I've been frustrated beyond words, but the lesson that I've learned about getting back up after setbacks or disappointments is to first feel the disappointment. Don't pretend it didn't happen.
Squaresoft has shown their talent through their impressive collection of titles, most notably the Final Fantasy series and their collaborations with industry giants. They also have more niche and controversial titles in their arsenal. This game in particular was once considered for the plotline of Final Fantasy VII, or could have also served as a sequel for Chrono Trigger. Instead, this game came into its own, developing a cult following inside a series of cherished games. This is the Xenogears iceberg. The original pronunciation. Many people, myself included, thought the name of the game was pronounced with the letter ZE, as in Xenogears. However, the original trailer dictates it's pronounced Xenogears.
Xeno.
Johnny pushing gear. Xeno. Gears. Step away from the gear.
Many people believe it can be pronounced in either form. Almost a different game. Xenogears was originally developed with Final Fantasy VII in mind. The script was submitted to Squaresoft and was rejected for being too dark and complicated. Then at a later point, it was almost used as a potential Chrono Trigger sequel too, but this was also rejected as an idea. Finally, the game was approved as a separate project and was first called Project Noah, but later on in development, Xenogears ended up becoming its final name and identity. Another interesting note is that since the game was originally thought to be a Final Fantasy, summons were once planned to be included in the game. Poorly localized, Xenogears was translated by only a single person called Richard Honeywood. The project was extremely difficult to translate due to the fact that only one person worked on it, and the game had a very large amount of text that had to be localized. The very first thing that had to be changed was a bunch of religious themes so that the game does not offend Western audiences. And themes of sexual abuse were heavily toned down too. Furthermore, there are unintended mistranslations of certain dialogue and many grammatical errors that can be found as well, although the person who worked on the localization cannot be blamed for the overload of work he was given. It's still unfortunate that such a cult classic is forever stuck in this state. Back and forth Final Fantasy references, since Xenogears is originally meant to be Final Fantasy VII. It's no surprise that the two games feature several references to each other. A poster of the iconic Tifa Lockhart can be found on a bedroom in the Solaris area of the game. On the other hand, Cloud Strife mentions Xenogears and the song Small Two of Pieces. Not only that, but there are also Final Fantasy VI references in Xenogears, as certain characters in the game have similar names to those in Fantasy VI referenced in the song Small Two of Pieces. pieces. Not only that, but there are also Final Fantasy VI references in Xenogears, as certain characters in the game have similar names to those in FF6. Spiritually succeeded, although Xenogears is the game that started it all. It's unfortunately the one most ignored in the larger Xeno meta-series of video games. Instead of receiving a sequel which was planned but never greenlit, Xenogears went on to have a spiritual successor called Xenosaga, which was a small franchise for some years with a couple of different games in the PlayStation 2 era. Then finally, the series evolved into Xenoblade Chronicles, which is a well-known Nintendo exclusive not many people know is related to the PS1 classic, Alice's wedding dress. When participating in the battle and tournament at Maratovich, don't attack Dan and keep defending yourself until he gets annoyed, and the battle ends. As he leaves, he will give you his sister's wedding dress, and any playable character in the game, including the males, can wear it. Uncomfortably dark. The Final Fantasy series has several mature themes in it too, but there's still a limit to how dark it can be since it is meant to appeal to a wide audience that enjoys fantasy video games. Xenogears is the exact opposite, and it's filled with strong themes such as the anima and animus, art, classism and racism, culture, abuse, free will, religion, genocide, existence, mental health, morality, sexuality, trauma, transhumanism, and various sexual atrocities. It surprises many people that the game did not receive a mature rating for just how far the narrative is always willing to go. Religious and psychological themes. Since the game is controversially deep, it's only natural that fans have been theorizing about it and analyzing what certain things in the game's narrative meant. The first thing that can be said about the game is that it deals with philosophical and psychological issues, taking inspiration from the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, and Carl Jung, to name a few. These examples can be seen in the ideologies of the characters and the game's world, as there is a lot of deep text in the game to uncover. The second thing is religion and the cynicism that the game shows towards it. Many characters in the game claim that religion or God do not exist, and that religion is something that is used to control the masses. And it even goes a bit darker than you would expect, as religious figures in the game are shown to be preying on refugees and children who seek them out for help, even one of the more toned-down discussions in the game, such as Sophia saying that faith in God should be found within oneself, seems to hint towards a dismay for those who try to show off their faith or practice it in masses. The game strongly says that religion and those who gain power through it should be regulated, as leaving them unexamined can cause many problems.
Откровение, глава 7. И вот произошло великое землетрясение. Он открыл шестую печать. Так все и закончится. Оккультной книги Рэй.
Нет, я хочу узнать, что случилось в Нью-Йорке.
Никто не видел привидений уже 30 лет.
Господи, ты знаешь, что тут происходит?
Наш дедушка был охотником за привидениями. Он знал, что-то
Xeno Smasher. Like it or not, many people discovered the Xeno franchise through Smash Bros. Ultimate. In June of 2018, we saw the introduction of Shulk. This exposure to the game helped introduce new people to the beloved franchise. And in March of this year, we saw the introduction of another addition to Smash Ultimate from the Xeno universe. This time it came in the form of a duo of characters named Pyrrha and Mithra. These two can actually swap between each other fluidly throughout the game. Xenoverse. Xenogears and Xenosaga are both a part of something larger called the Xenoverse. It could be considered a sci-fi remake of the Bible as a long and epic story about the beginnings, endings, and meanings of the local universe and the human conditions within it. The Xenoverse consists of 3 major story arcs that are taking place thousands of years apart. The story arcs. The entirety of the story takes place in a time period of over 10,000 years. The Xenoverse's first story arc begins almost 5,000 years after humankind left Earth. 10,000 years later, the second story arc begins, and the third and final story arc happens after this point. Xenogears Perfect Works, the real thing. This is a book covering the entire storyline and backstory of Xenogears in detail. The book covered the worlds and canonical character details that were never revealed in the game. You can also find a timeline that corresponds in a similar fashion to the Xenosaga series. But this does confirm that the Xenogears universe is indeed separate from the Xenosaga. Playable Margie. Although players theorize that several characters in Xenogears were meant to be playable but were not included later on in development, such as Ramses, there is a confirmed case too, in which it was officially revealed that a character was meant to be playable at first, on the 254th page of Perfect Works. There is a sketch of Margie who has weapons hidden in her cloak. The text reveals that she was meant to be a playable character, and this concept art was a part of that idea. Episode 5. Xenogears is also known as Xenogears Episode 5. Although this is the first game in the series and a complete story unto itself, it's intended to be the 5th episode in a total of 6 stories that are a part of a larger connected universe. Episode 5 is Xenogears, and the first episode was roughly adapted into the spiritual successor Xenosaga, as some of the events intended for Xenogears Episode 1 were reimagined as the story for Xenosaga. But it's a rough reimagining as the 2 games are ultimately different series, and adapt the events prior to the Eldritch crashing onto the Xenogears planet differently. As for the rest of the episodes, according to rough knowledge gained from the Perfect Works information, fans have analyzed that Episode 2 would have been after the Eldritch crash and during the lifetime of Abel and Cain. Episode 3 would have been during the Zeboim era with Kim. Episode 4 would have been Lakin's story alongside Sophia, Krelian in the war between Shevat, Solaris, and Nissen. And finally, the least is known about Episode 6, and all that has been theorized is that it would have taken place after Xenogears 5. Whether it would have had a different protagonist or a time skip is unknown, as the information provided is too vague. But all of this reveals that Xenogears was meant to
Tu vois ce stylo qui sert d'anti-sèche? C'est un raccourci pour aller plus vite et avoir les mêmes résultats que ceux qui ont bossé leur cours pendant 10 heures.
Наоборот, это да.
25. Best PS1 JRPGs. Number 25. Shadow Madness.
О, я это
Obviously, Graves' foundation and blueprint
знаю. Я эту игру знаю.
for Shadow Madness is Square's Final Fantasy VII. Just looking at how the game works in interface and gameplay, it is clear that the developer based its design on Square's RPG. So yes, Shadow Madness is enjoyable, but not right off the bat. You have to give it a few chapters to get to the good stuff. Number 24. Wild Arms 2. While a number of RPG players have fond memories of the original Wild Arms, they'll most likely be surprised and dismayed by its dinosaur of a sequel. While this doesn't bode well for Wild Arms 2, it is pleasing to note how far the genre has advanced since the original game's release.
Играл за это.
Number 23. Saga Frontier. In all fairness, Saga Frontier has a great story. It's a little vague at first, but when all the scenarios begin to knit themselves together, the game starts to get really good. If you like role-playing games, and you're just itching for another Square RPG, Saga Frontier is probably a safe choice.
Пятого.
Like father, like son.
Number 22. Jade Cocoon, Story of the Tamamayan. The harsh truth behind Jade Cocoon's beautiful presentation is that there isn't a whole lot of game. Again, the game's fine mix of RPG components and monster combining elements make Jade Cocoon a game that is like no other. But hardcore players may feel a little ripped off after finding out the story mode takes about 15 hours to beat. Number 21. Breath of Fire 3. Even with its handful of new features, Breath of Fire 3 breaks little new ground. But for an RPG, the way in which everything in the game is arranged and executed shows an incredible amount of attention to detail and depth.